Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everyone. I have learned so much about what is going on in our world concerning therapy. And we've heard the word, we know it's impactful, but from this gentleman and his organization, volumes I've learned in the last couple of weeks. We're going to even dig deeper into that today. Music therapy, arts therapy heals so many in so many different ways. And he's the gentleman behind Baltic Street Into Action. And that's an organization that helps so many people through this type of therapy. Peter Jampel joins us again here on the program. Peter, welcome back. How are you?
Steve, I'm great. So good to be back with you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing people to the party, if you will. And we've got somebody today with a lot of insight. Who do we have?
Well, for today's party, I am pleased to present Dr. Lisa Summer. And Lisa is an expert in music and consciousness. And we will be looking at the role of how music promotes insight, awareness, and a transformation of consciousness through the properties that music has to induce imagery. And there is a long and fascinating tale that we will launch into with Lisa, whose background extends to the origins of this type of music therapy called guided image and music therapy. Lisa, just to give her fair due, is a professor emeritus at Anna Maria College in their music therapy program, which is now closed. She is also the director of the Institute for Music and Consciousness and is a researcher at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and at Massachusetts General Hospital's gastroenterology department. So, Lisa, thank you so much for being here today. Really,
it's great to be at this party.
Yeah, and you run deep. We're talking about music therapy. We're talking about things that even go deeper than that. When it even gets down to psychedelic research, which I hope we can get to momentarily. Where do you want to start? Should we start with music therapy?
Lisa, give us a little background about the history of music and psychedelic research and music and imagery, if you would.
Yeah. So where I want to start today is with my mentor, Helen Bonney, which is actually back in the 60s. And intertwined. It's music therapy and psychedelics are intertwined with Helen Bonney. So I think first to just say that the context of the 60s and 70s in regard therapy in general as a profession was that there was a huge rebellion in those days against verbal therapy, and humanistic psychology was just coming to the fore with a focus on the therapeutic effect of experiencing. So let's stop talking about memories. Let's stop talking about our feelings. The idea was to just bring it into the here and now of the session room as a full experience. And that's about consciousness. It has to do with the first step of consciousness is going inside, is taking the experience rather than therapy being about the external world, about going a little deeper into the self. So in the 70s, it was really natural for music to become a little more central in the therapy professions because it's so effective in stimulating strong emotional, somatic experiences, bringing memories, bringing people swiftly into their internal world compared with words. So, and then also in the 70s was when psychiatry was really seeking alternatives to medication and experimenting with LSD as a hallucinogen, as a form of psychiatric treatment. And so their idea was also experiential, was that instead of a psychiatric patient taking a long-term medication for depression, what if we could give this one-time, very high dose of LSD that threw a patient into a really strong inner experience that lasted a whole day long, that maybe that could be not only life-changing in the external world, but it could somehow reconstruct the inner world because of its power. And so that was a combination of experience and medicine. So sometimes psychedelic work is called experiential medicine because a psychedelic is a strong acting medicine that creates a strong experience, a really strong experience. And the idea in those days was to create the strongest, most powerful experience possible because they were finding a direct connection that the strongest sessions had the strongest positive outcomes. So into that 60s, now I can introduce Helen Bonney and maybe just say a little bit about her. Helen was this really amazingly well-grounded, studious, excellent classical musician, and she had this amazing adventurous spirit. So she was so perfect. She was such a perfect figure for the origins of music therapy and the origins of music in psychedelics as well. And she went to the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center where they were doing LSD research. It was a really incredible landmark study for psychedelics. And they were already using music. So this idea that somehow music and psychedelics are really closely linked. And Helen learned how to create music programs. So hearing all that, it's not surprising that the music that she used and that they were using was very evocative, very strong. And what they discovered was a kind of profile. They discovered, and what Helen learned was how to program music for a psychedelic profile, which meant how to link pieces together so that it aligned with the intensity, with the drug's intensity over a period of 12 hours. So that became called music programming, and it came into the psychedelic literature. In the psychedelic literature, it's called playlists, which I disagree with. I call it music programming. In music therapy, we call them music programs that are programs that are linked together for a specific purpose. So Helen became an expert in music programming.
Wow. Lots to digest there, but I want to thank you for bring up the point about therapy. How back in the day, you say the word therapy, people would look at you, that's, oh, somebody has a problem. Oh, we can't look at that. You got singled out. And the psychedelics in terms like LSD, again, taboo from the same period in time. Now you look at microdosing, doctors microdose themselves because it's so beneficial. It's finally, this is all opened up. So, with your help and others, I appreciate that. We all do.
Thank you.
So, Lisa, let's bring that story a little forward.
Yeah.
There was then a crackdown on psychedelic research, putting it on lists of dangerous drugs, and a kind of poo-pooing of people who promoted that. Tell us where music therapy went with music and imagery in a non-pharmaceutical context.
Yeah. So when the government shut down that LSD research, actually at almost around the same time, Helen made a really shocking discovery. She actually gave a sort of demonstration session to someone without the LSD. She just had them lie down, listen to music, and guided them. And what she discovered, which was really shocking to her, was that without the LSD, with just the same kind of music, it created the same kind of experience as LSD. And so that became a really important element for Helen's work. And there was also another researcher named Stan Groff, who was a psychiatrist, who he created his own method. So both Stan Groff and Helen Bonney came out of this LSD research, creating a music alone, like a non-pharmacological method that put music more as a central component. And what Helen did, Helen's method is a little bit more a replication of the LSD work than Groff's was. She just basically took the exact treatment protocol from the LSD research, compressed it all into a 2-hour therapy session. And then she created she created different music programs. So then she wasn't held to a specific profile. She started creating different kinds of programs for practitioners to use. So she created a method that's called GIM, Guided Imagery and Music. Usually we call her way of doing it the traditional method. We call it the Bonney method. And that method entered in the 70s, entered the repertoire of sort of self-help. It became a sort of established humanistic transpersonal method for personal growth. It was like in the human potential movement. It wasn't so well grounded as a therapy, actually. And that was when I went to study with Helen. That was in the late 70s. And there weren't even very many therapists studying GIM. But when I studied GIM after my training, I got a job at a psychiatric hospital working with patients with mood disorders, substance use disorders. And of course, the GIM method, which was so strong, was way too strong for psychiatric patients. And so after my training in GIM, I needed to adapt what Helen did and create safer, gentler experiences. So what I did grew into a clinical model of GIM. So Helen's model was more for well adults, and I grew a clinical model. And that clinical model is what Helen wanted. She wanted to expand the scope of practice. So I created simpler, more flexible strategies, more diverse music, shorter music, using the client's music. And then in the 80s, Helen and I blended her traditional GIM and the clinical model together into a training at the Bonney Foundation. The 80s and 90s, that all grew. I'm still carrying on Helen's GIM legacy, and doing that clinical work, but for me, mostly training.
So interesting. You mentioned about the patient's music, and I'm intrigued. Music lover. I've been playing music on the radio. I won't even tell you how long, since I was 17. So it resonates with me. How is that done when you work with somebody in terms of this type of therapy, picking out certain music as opposed to you selecting the music or sounds for them?
Yeah. I think what I would say, Steve, is that when I see a client initially, the most effective way to create a relationship, a safe relationship, one that empowers the client as well, is to use the music that they bring to me, rather than them looking at me as the expert, like I'm here to choose music for you. Because actually each person is kind of like the expert of their own music preference. And almost everyone that I've ever seen in therapy, that I've ever trained, has an impulse for using music in a healthy way. Like here's the music that relaxes me. Here's the music that pumps me up. Here's the music that does this. So when you slow a person down to think about how they choose music in their daily life, then it's usually a really simple process to pull from what they already use and what they already know in a way that can be harnessed as a therapeutic to start with.
Almost sounds like it's the baseline.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating. Peter?
Yeah. Well, I think we have a picture now of kind of the evolution of using music in a way that's consistent with a kind of client-centered approach that integrates client preferences and strengths, and use that as a foundation for developing a relationship with the individual, and also how music promotes imagery, and it facilitates awareness and a transformation of consciousness and insight. And I think with that understanding, we can take a look now at the modern development of how music and psychedelic research has taken a leap forward into new areas of addressing stress disorders, people in chronic pain. Your current research, Lisa, in working at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, addresses how specifically psilocybin can be an asset in working towards pain management, a sense of how people become hopeless in the face of constant pain and suffering. Can you talk now about where your research is, where the field of music therapy works together with this new research?
Yeah, so I think it's not coming together yet. Music therapy and psychedelic research is not exactly together yet. Okay. And what I can say is that when I was brought onto the team at Dana-Farber, I was really just considered a music programmer. And but that as I attended team meetings, that my team started realizing that I was also a therapist, even though they knew I was a therapist. The idea of music therapy was so unknown. So I think that's what's happening now, maybe, is that the idea that music, okay, yeah. So when I got onto the team, the idea was that I would create a music program. I was outside the team. I would hand them a music program, and they would use that. They would take that as a tool to use for their clients, and they would give it to the clients on the dosing day, as is done in almost every psychedelic session. Music is really closely linked with the dosing day. And then what became apparent was, actually, I wasn't going to make a music program that was from my music, because I cared about the music from the treatment team. So all the therapists who were going to give the therapy, I wanted to know their music preferences as well. And so I started creating music programs for the treatment team, for the therapists on the team, before I started creating the patient program. And then as I did that, then the therapist started to realize the power of music, like, oh my God, the power of music in my life. Well, hey, our clients are coming. Oh my God, the clients have their own relationship with music. Maybe we should ask them what music they listen to. Maybe we should listen to their preferences. And then the idea that, why would you introduce music just in the dosing session when we have 2 preparatory sessions? How unthoughtful it is to not introduce music at the beginning. If music, maybe I would say it this way, Peter, in music therapy, we often say music is the co-therapist. And so we say there's a therapeutic triad. And to say it bluntly, you wouldn't introduce a new therapist in the middle of therapy and just say, hey, for this really important dosing session, here's a new person that's going to come in. You've never seen them before. You have no idea what they are. Right. So this idea that of music truly being a co-therapist, that the client is going to develop a relationship with. The relationship is an unfolding one that starts in the preparatory sessions. They start to listen to a little bit of the music program before the dosing day, and that the patient's program is also made of the preferences of the therapists as well, the musical considerations from the therapist as well. So that it's really, music is not thought of as a tool that's brought in to act upon the client during the 6 hours of dosing, but it's really thought of as another relationship that is introduced by the therapists throughout the whole form of treatment.
Interesting to put it that way, because we have a relationship with music. We individually do, when you think of it that way. So instead of looking at it as, in the tool chest, we got this, we're going to use that to work on you. We've had a relationship with music since we were babies. In the womb, Mom was listening to music. So it's fascinating when you look at this, with a broad stroke. We have about 2 minutes left, Peter. Do you want to share more about the organization? Where do you want to go here?
Well, first, I think that the idea of music being integral to human well-being and how psychedelics can add a dimension to the use of music is an important consideration. Look, we have a limited amount of time. Lisa, I want to give you a chance just to talk about how people can find out more about the work. You're also working, in cancer research. You're working in gastroenterology. How could people find out more about your approach and the work?
Yeah, so I'm happy to hear from anyone in my Gmail account, which is lsummer777@gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me. There's a really nice, a really good conference at MGH, Massachusetts General Hospital. It's the 4th annual psychedelic conference. You can just look up Mass General Hospital. It's November 16th and 17th. So I can recommend that as an excellent conference to attend. I'll be giving a presentation about music and psychedelics. But if you're interested in GIM or anything else, and Dana-Farber is an amazing place for cancer care. So amazing in Boston.
Wow. I appreciate you bringing this to light and demystifying all of it and taking away the stigma from all of this. Again, you say LSD, psychedelics, those who don't know, just put it to the side and don't even want to discuss it. But finally, it's being realized that there's a place for that, and also music therapy. Baltic Street into Action. Peter, if somebody wants to learn more about the organization, best way to do that?
Come to our website, balticstreetintooaction.com. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and thoughts about this. Really appreciate it, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, Peter. And we'll be right back.
Bye-bye.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes 2. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese!
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzzed driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzzed driving, because buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.